The conference floor buzzed with excitement. Screens flashed with the company's signature blue. The stage lights were already warming up, and technicians rushed around with clipboards and headsets. Tomorrow was launch day. My launch day. The day the software I had built from scratch would finally go live. 5 years of fixing bugs at 2 a.m., 5 years of covering for incompetent team leads, 5 years of designing features that the executives took credit for. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that my name would finally be on the spotlight. Or so I thought. I stood near the edge of the main hall, clutching my laptop. The same one filled with the code that had become my life's work. The air felt electric, vibrating with anticipation. My manager, Oliver, had texted me to stop by his office before the final prep meeting. "We need to talk. Quick." I didn't think much of it. Oliver was dramatic about everything. Coffee orders, Slack messages, even calendar invites. Still, something in the pit of my stomach tightened as I walked through the hallway. Dark, quiet, too empty for this time of day. When I knocked on his door, he didn't say, "Come in." He just yelled, "Yeah," like I was an inconvenience typical. I pushed the door open. Oliver was seated behind his desk, leaning back like some king on a throne. Across from him sat a girl, barely 20, bright-eyed, smiling too wide I recognized her. The new intern. Name, Mia? No, Maya. She'd been here for maybe 6 weeks. Oliver clasped his hands together dramatically. "Laura," he said, drawing out every syllable. "We've been reviewing things, and we've decided to go in a new direction." I frowned. "A new direction? For what?" "The launch," he said casually, as though he wasn't detonating a bomb in my life. "We're replacing you with Maya as the product lead." My pulse spiked. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You're joking." He smiled. That thin corporate smile that always meant something awful. "We're looking for more energy, fresh ideas. You're incredibly competent, Laura, but we need someone with vibrance, presence, someone who fits the vibe." I blinked. The vibe? Maya twirled a pen between her fingers, trying and failing to hide her smirk. Oliver continued. "Tomorrow, Maya will be presenting the product, leading the rollout, handling press questions. You'll support her transition by handing over your laptop, documentation, everything she might need." My laptop. My code. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, suffocating. I took a long, slow breath. "Oliver," I said calmly, "I've been building this software for 3 years. I wrote every line. I know every module, every integration point, every patch. Maya has barely..." He cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Laura, your emotional tone is a lot right now. Try to be a team player." Emotional tone, team player, all the corporate gaslighting greatest hits in one sentence. I looked at Maya. She avoided my eyes. Guilt flickering, but not enough to stop her. Not enough to turn down a promotion built on my work. I forced my breathing to slow. If I reacted now, loudly, emotionally, I would lose. Completely. So instead, I smiled. A small, polite, terrifying smile. "Of course," I said softly. "If that's what the team needs, I respect the decision." Oliver's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected that. People like him never expect quiet women to have sharp edges. I opened my laptop, typed a few things, closed it, and placed it gently on his desk. "Good luck tomorrow," I said, handing it to Maya like a gift. "Truly." Oliver beamed, relieved. Maya mumbled a thank you. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that the code they had been bragging about for weeks was still operating under my private license. The company had access, but they didn't own it. They thought they did, of course, because Oliver never reads the fine print and legal never bothered to ask for a formal transfer of IP rights. I had waited for them to treat me like a human being. They didn't. So now they would learn what happens when you mistake quiet for weak. As I stepped out of the office, the air in my lungs felt lighter, cleaner. I walked past the conference hall again, watching the screens flicker with promotional teasers. The entire company was counting down the hours to launch day would be fun. Very, very fun. Because tomorrow the world, and Oliver, would discover just how costly it is to underestimate the wrong woman. The morning of launch day felt strangely calm. Too calm, like the stillness right before a storm breaks. I woke up early, brewed coffee, and sat on my balcony watching the sunrise stretch across the skyline. The city looked peaceful. My mind didn't. Today was the day they'd stand on that stage, smile for the cameras, and pretend the product was theirs. Today was the day Oliver would introduce his brilliant young prodigy, and Maya would take credit for 3 years of work she could barely navigate without Google. But today was also the day everything would catch up with them. Still, I felt no rush, no panic, no guilt. Just clarity. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, my closest colleague, the only one who had ever actually seen how much work I did. Rachel, are you coming to the launch? Me, no why? Rachel, you won't believe the chaos here. I'll call you in a minute. Chaos? Already? I set down my coffee just as Rachel called. Laura, she whispered, as if hiding in a supply closet. No one knows where anything is. Oliver somehow thought Maya could walk in and magically understand your entire system. She's been product lead for less than 24 hours and she's already crying in the restroom. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Didn't they have my documentation? That's the problem, Rachel said. Your documentation is connected to your private repository. They didn't realize until this morning the system is asking for your credentials. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Of course it was. It is freaking out, Rachel continued. They're telling Oliver someone needs to contact you immediately. A small, cold smile curled on my lips. And has he? There was a pause. Not yet. He's trying to fix it internally. Typical Oliver, too proud to admit he'd made a mistake, I thanked Rachel and hung up. I could have reached out. I could have offered help. But something inside me, something that had been crushed for years, finally stood up and said, no, not again. Around 10 a.m., I turned on my TV and switched to the live stream of the launch. The stage was bright, polished, packed with reporters and investors. The giant countdown clock behind them read 00, 59:42, less than an hour to go. Oliver walked onto the stage, microphone clipped to his suit, grinning like a politician during election week. He started with his usual speech. Inspirational cliches, dramatic pauses, exaggerated confidence. But underneath the smile, I could see the tension in his jaw. His eyes darted to the side screens a little too often. Something was wrong. Good. Maya appeared next, shaky smile, notes clenched in her hands. She started presenting the product overview, trying to sound polished and assured. But her voice kept wavering, cracking in places she hoped no one would notice. 20 minutes in, Oliver gestured for the technical demo to begin. This was it. The main screen behind them flickered, loading the interface. A loading icon appeared, then a message. License invalid. Ownership verification required contact. L. Hartman, developer license holder. The room froze. The audience murmured. Cameras zoomed in. Oliver's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. He rushed to the podium, covering the microphone with his hand, hissing something at Maya. She looked like she might faint. Reporters began whispering. Investors exchanged anxious looks. Someone in the front row started filming the error message with their phone. I watched calmly from my couch. On screen, Oliver attempted to improvise. Just a small technical hiccup, nothing to worry about. The screen flickered again. Access denied. Missing authorized credential system locked at 10:27 a.m. by primary developer. The audience erupted into chatter. Rachel texted me instantly. Oliver is sweating. It is running around like their shoes are on fire. This is wild. Another message followed. People are asking who the primary developer is. Oliver is trying not to say your name. He didn't want the world to know the truth, that the company was launching software they didn't legally own, that they had pushed out the one person who actually understood it. The live stream abruptly cut to a technical difficulties screen. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from an unknown number I didn't answer. Seconds later, another call. Then another. At 10:41 a.m., a text appeared. Oliver, we need to talk, now. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of 5 years settle into a single breath. Then I typed, I'm busy. Good luck with the launch. I hit send. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. The afternoon unfolded in waves of ringing, buzzing, and vibrating chaos. My phone lit up with missed calls faster than I could swipe them away. Unknown numbers, company lines, even Oliver's personal cell. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, eating leftover pasta and watching notifications pour in like I was observing someone else's disaster, not the one I had quietly engineered. At 12:03 p.m., Rachel called. She didn't even say hello. Laura, it's bad. I raised an eyebrow. Define bad. She took a shaky breath. It says they can't legally troubleshoot anything because the license isn't the company's legal is losing their minds. Investors are demanding an explanation. And Oliver? She hesitated. I've never seen him like this. A small part of me, a part I'd buried under years of being polite, accommodating, and quiet, felt a spark of satisfaction. What happened after the live stream cut? I asked. You want the short version or the dramatic version? Give me the truth. Rachel exhaled. They tried to hack into your account. I froze. They what? Oh, don't worry, she said quickly. Security flagged it immediately. The company could get sued just for attempting it. Legal shut it down before it got too far. I rubbed my forehead. They're unbelievable. That's not even the worst part, Rachel continued. One of the investors, the big one, Dawson Capital, demanded to know why the company doesn't own the product's IP. Someone in the back accidentally mentioned your name. You should have seen the looks on their faces. I blinked slowly. That wasn't an accident. She hesitated. No, I don't think it was. Silence stretched between us for a moment. Are you okay? Rachel finally asked. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, for the first time in a long time? Yeah. She let out a breath of relief. Good, because they're going to come crawling, Laura. They're desperate. As soon as we hung up, another text appeared, from one of the senior engineers, Jonas. I had no idea they were doing this to you. If you need a reference or anything, I'm here. Then another. Emily. Just watch the recording. They're screwed without you. And another, dev team group chat. Guys, we messed up. We should have backed you. I stared at the messages, feeling something complicated move inside me. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even pride. It was recognition. The realization that people had seen more than I thought they did. Around 1:20 p.m., my doorbell rang. Twice. 3 times. I walked to the peephole and sighed. Oliver. He stood there sweating through his designer shirt, tie pulled loose, hair messy. A man who'd been humbled by reality. I opened the door just enough to look at him, not enough to let him in. Laura, he said, breathless. We need to talk. No, I replied. You need to talk, I'm listening. He swallowed hard. You know the situation. The launch is dead. The investors want answers. The board wants a fix. We need you to... No. He blinked. No? No, Oliver, I repeated. You made your decision. He stepped forward slightly. I stepped back. We can compensate you. He rushed out. A bonus, equity, a lead role. You replaced me with someone who didn't understand the product. I said quietly. You told me she fit the vibe better. You humiliated me behind closed doors and expected me to hand over everything like a good little employee. That was a mistake, he said quickly. I admit that now. I panicked. You didn't panic, I corrected. You underestimated me. He looked like I'd slapped him. I took a slow breath. The only reason you're here is because you thought I'd be too scared to walk away. You assumed my loyalty was permanent. It wasn't. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Look, we can fix this. If you give us access to the license. There it is, I said softly. He froze. What? That's all you care about, not me. Not the work, not what you did. My voice stayed calm, steady. Just the code. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, Goodbye, Oliver. I began to close the door. His hand shot out, stopping it. Laura, please. I met his eyes through the narrow gap. The eyes of a man who finally realized he wasn't in control. Move your hand, I said. He did. The door shut with a soft, final click. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something much stronger. Freedom. I walked back to my living room, my phone buzzing again with new messages. Among them was one from a number I hadn't seen in years, Andrew Carter. I heard what happened at the launch today. Are you available to talk? I stared at the message. For the first time since this all began, the future didn't look uncertain. It looked promising. Very promising. I stared at Andrew Carter's message for a full minute before I even breathed. Andrew had once been the only executive in the company who actually understood what I did. Not just technically, but strategically. He'd championed my early prototypes. He'd pushed for budget increases. He'd defended me during meetings where Oliver tried to take credit for features he couldn't even explain. And then, 3 years ago, the board pushed Andrew out after clashing with the CEO one too many times. The company had never recovered from losing him. Not in innovation, not in leadership, not in morale. Now he was messaging me. My thumb hovered over the screen before I finally typed, I'm available. What's going on? Andrew, I'll call you in 10. I set the phone down, suddenly aware of how quiet my apartment was. The launch disaster still played on repeat in my mind. Oliver sweating, Maya panicking, investors demanding answers. But beneath that, something new was growing. Possibility. At exactly 10 minutes, my phone lit up. Laura? Andrew's voice hadn't changed. Calm, warm, sharp. The kind of voice that made people sit straighter. Hi, Andrew, I said, trying to keep my composure. I'm guessing your morning was eventful, he said. You could call it that. He let out a breath that sounded halfway between a laugh and disbelief. I saw the clip online. My phone hasn't stopped ringing investors, reporters, former colleagues. Everyone wants to know how the company managed to launch a product they don't own. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Laura, he continued, I'm going to ask you something directly. Are you looking for your next step? I leaned back in my chair. I haven't really thought that far. Well, Andrew said, I have. It was quiet for a moment. I'm building a new firm, Carter Technologies, he explained. We're focusing on scalable software solutions for logistics and healthcare sectors. I need a head of engineering, someone who understands systems deeply, someone who's proven they can create something from nothing. My heartbeat quickened. And you want that to be me? I've wanted that to be you for years, he said. The only reason I didn't reach out sooner was because I knew you were loyal to your team, but after what happened today? He paused. I'm not going to pretend this wasn't the opportunity I was waiting for. I exhaled, letting the reality settle. What exactly are you offering? A director role, full authority over your department, a salary that reflects your actual worth. And, he added, equity. Equity. The word hit different. It meant ownership, power, a say in what I created. Can you come by the office tomorrow? Andrew asked. I want to show you what we're building. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I'll be there. After the call, I sat quietly for a while. The room felt lighter somehow, like the air itself had shifted. It wasn't just that someone wanted me. It was that someone saw me around 3 p.m. Rachel texted. Update. The board called an emergency meeting. Oliver looked like he was about to pass out. Me. Anything on the product? Rachel. They're considering scrapping the whole launch. Investors are furious. Honestly, it's a meltdown. I typed a quick reply, but before I could hit send, another text came in. Rachel. Also, people know you didn't sabotage anything. Word is spreading fast. Folks are saying the company pushed out the person who built the entire system. Kinda proud of you. A strange mixture of sadness and gratitude washed over me. I had spent so long feeling invisible there. I never expected anyone to defend me after I left. By early evening, I decided to take a walk. The air was crisp, the sidewalks busy, the city humming with life. I let my feet take me wherever they wanted. A quiet park near the water, I sat on a bench, watching waves hit the rocks. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about deadlines, bug reports, or Oliver's condescending tone. I wasn't dreading Monday mornings. I wasn't bracing myself to be overlooked again. I was thinking about tomorrow. A new company, a new role, a new beginning. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Something I wished I had understood years ago. Sometimes the universe doesn't push you out of a place because you're losing something. Sometimes it kicks you out because you're finally ready for something better. I looked out at the darkening horizon, my reflection wavering on the water's surface. Tomorrow, everything would change. And for once, the change would be on my terms. I arrived at Carter Technologies the next morning with a strange mix of confidence and disbelief. The building wasn't flashy or towering like my old company's headquarters. It was modest, 3 floors, glass entrance, modern interior. But something about it felt alive, purposeful, like a place where things were built, not stolen. Andrew met me in the lobby. He looked energized, almost younger than I remembered Laura. He said warmly, shaking my hand. Welcome. He gave me a tour. Open workspaces filled with actual collaboration. Whiteboards covered in real ideas, not corporate buzzwords. And a small but passionate team that greeted him like they genuinely liked him. We ended in a quiet conference room. This, he said, sliding a folder in front of me, is the official offer. I opened it. A director title, A competitive salary, actual leadership authority, and significant equity. Real equity, not the fake promises my old company dangled like a carrot. I met his eyes. Andrew, this is generous. It's what you're worth. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not hiring you for what you did at your previous company. I'm hiring you for what you can build here. Those words settled deep in my chest, grounding me in a way I didn't expect. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a call from Rachel. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Rachel? I answered. Oh my God, Laura, you need to hear this, she said, breathless. The board just finished their emergency meeting. And? They fired Oliver. I froze. Already? He tried to blame the whole thing on you, she said. Claimed you sabotaged the launch out of revenge. IT and legal shut that down immediately. They told the board the system error wasn't sabotage. It was negligence. On his part. Of course it was. Rachel continued. Investors pulled out. The board said they can't recover the product in time. They canceled the project entirely. I leaned against the wall, absorbing the words. She exhaled. Honestly, I think this is the best thing that could have happened to all of us. People are relieved he's gone. Toxic leadership only lasts so long. We talked a bit longer. She was considering leaving the company as well. Then hung up. For a moment, I stood there in the quiet hallway, my phone warm in my hand, the weight of everything hitting me at once. 5 years of being overlooked. 5 years of being dismissed, minimized, replaced. 5 years of quietly carrying the company on my back. And now it had all collapsed. Not because I destroyed anything, but because they had built everything on arrogance and shortcuts. "Everything okay?" Andrew asked gently when I stepped back inside. I nodded slowly. "Better than okay." He sat across from me again. "Before you answer, I want you to know something I'm not asking you to join because of what happened at your old company. I'm asking because I believe you're the kind of leader who builds, not breaks." His words were steady, grounded, real. "Laura," he continued, "I want you to say yes because this is where you want to be, not because you're running from something else." That stopped me, because it was true. For the first time, I wasn't running. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was choosing. I closed the folder, slid it back to him, and smiled. "I accept." The relief on his face was genuine. "Welcome to Carter Technologies," he said. We shook hands, and just like that, the future shifted. That afternoon, after my onboarding and introductions, I stepped into what would now be my office. A smaller space than the corner rooms executives fought over, but with a window overlooking the city and enough room for everything I needed. As I placed my bag on the desk, my phone buzzed again. This time, from an unknown number, but I didn't need to open it to know exactly who it was. I read the message anyway. "Oliver, I heard where you ended up. You could have fixed things here. You chose to burn bridges." "Oliver, I hope it was worth it." I stared at the screen for a moment, considering my response. Then I typed, "I didn't burn a bridge. I walked away from one that was already collapsing. And yes, it was worth it." I hit send. Then, without a second thought, I blocked the number. As evening settled in, I sat at my new desk. The city lights flickering outside, the office was quiet, peaceful. I opened my laptop and began mapping out the new system architecture Andrew and I had discussed. Piece by piece, I felt myself rebuilding. Not the product, not the code, but my sense of worth. And in that calm, steady silence, the most powerful truth finally settled. Being underestimated isn't an insult. It's a warning. Not about you, but about them. Tomorrow, everything would begin again. On my terms. In my space. In a place where I wasn't replaceable. I was essential. And this time, I wasn't handing over anything I built. I was building a future they would never be part of. Apologize or leave. Those were the exact words the CEO, Mr. Beaumont, said while staring at me across the polished glass conference table. His son, Ethan, lounged in a chair beside him like a bored prince waiting for someone to kneel. My hands were folded calmly in front of me. My heart wasn't calm, but I refused to let either of them see it. And all I said was, "All right." Ethan smirked like a child who'd finally gotten his favorite toy taken away from another kid. Mr. Beaumont blinked, surprised I didn't argue. He expected negotiation. Or begging. I gave him neither. He cleared his throat as if regaining control. "Since you understand, consider this your final warning. You will apologize to Ethan for failing to follow through." I didn't fail to follow through. I cut in, voice steady. I refused to approve an unbudgeted vendor contract without proper documentation. That's policy, not disrespect. His jaw tightened. Ethan leaned forward. "See? She's doing it again. She thinks she knows more than me." I didn't respond. Arguing with someone who confused ego with competence was pointless. Mr. Beaumont locked his gaze on me again. 2 week suspension, without pay. You'll return once you've apologized and recommitted to proper professional conduct." There was a moment, one sharp still second, where everyone waited for my reaction. I nodded once. Understood. That wasn't the reaction they were prepared for. Ethan straightened, his smirk fading just enough to betray confusion. Mr. Beaumont looked almost disappointed, like a man robbed of the dramatic power struggle he rehearsed. "Is there anything else?" I asked. He waved his hand. "We expect you back on the 16th. I stood, gathered my notes, and walked out. Not fast, not flustered. Controlled, silent. But every step felt like shedding weights I had carried far too long. My office had been my second home for 4 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. My walls held frame certifications, awards, and thank you cards from project teams I had led through chaos and impossible timelines. This wasn't just a job. I had built entire departments, systems, procedures, things that kept the company running smoothly while others collected credit. Ethan wasn't one of those others. He collected power, and his father handed it to him wrapped in gold. 3 days earlier, Ethan had demanded I approve a vendor invoice triple the agreed amount. No documentation, no justification, no discussion. Just do it. When I asked for a breakdown and contract versioning, he stormed out and filed a complaint claiming I was blocking innovation. I didn't think he'd take it this far. But deep down, maybe I always knew something like this was coming. People like Ethan don't hate competence. They fear it. And fear makes them dangerous. I packed slowly. Not because I needed time, but because I wanted clarity. Every award I pulled down reminded me of working 70-hour weeks while Ethan posted rooftop cocktails on social media. Every manual, every blueprint, every signed-off approval reminded me I wasn't lucky. I was necessary. My email pinged. James, lead project manager. "What happened? Ethan's telling people you're suspended." Maya, senior analyst. "Please tell me there's a misunderstanding." Alex, compliance. "Do you need support? I'll testify if necessary." My throat tightened. Not with sadness, but with recognition. People had noticed. People cared. Not about drama, about integrity. I silenced my phone and kept packing. My resignation letter took 12 minutes to finalize, not because I didn't know what to say, but because it needed precision. No emotion, no accusation, just truth. A clock ticked somewhere in the office, the first time I'd ever actually heard it. Time felt louder when you knew you were done pretending. I saved the file, printed it, signed it. Then I paused. My hand hovered over the send button of an email that contained project documentation, financial inconsistencies, timeline impact reports, and audit-ready summaries of every violation Ethan had pushed for. Facts, no insults, no opinions, just receipts. Click, sent. The next morning, I arrived early, too early for witnesses. I placed the resignation letter neatly on my empty desk, locked my office door behind me, turned in my badge, and walked toward the elevator. The moment I stepped inside, the building felt lighter, as if the walls themselves knew something irreversible had shifted. By noon, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, emails, then one voicemail after another. But one message stood out. Not by tone, but by fear. "Kate, this is Robert from legal. Please tell me you didn't post the documentation. Call me back immediately." 2 seconds later, another voicemail. Another voice. Mr. Beaumont. His voice wasn't commanding anymore. It trembled. "Kate, we need to talk." And then the most satisfying pause. "Please." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the consequences? They were only just starting to unfold. When I arrived at the office the next morning, I didn't expect a spectacle. I expected quiet awkwardness, maybe whispers. But the moment I stepped into the lobby, I realized something else entirely had happened. People were staring. Not subtly, not politely. Wide-eyed, stiff-backed, waiting. The receptionist, who normally smiled at everyone like her life depended on it, looked pale. She cleared her throat. "Kate, the CEO asked me to send you upstairs immediately." No greeting, No small talk, just urgency. I nodded once and stepped toward the elevators. As the doors closed, my phone buzzed again. 5 messages from people I barely spoke to. 1 from a client, 2 from department heads, 1 from HR, and 1 from Ethan. Where are you? We need to talk. I didn't respond. The doors opened to the executive floor, a place that usually felt tense from ambition, but today felt suffocating. Whispers stopped the moment I walked through. Someone hissed under their breath. That's her. Another murmured, I told him she wouldn't take it. I ignored all of it and made my way down the hallway. Mr. Beaumont was standing outside the conference room, not seated, not relaxed. Standing, pacing, jaw tight. The moment he saw me, his expression morphed into something between relief and anger. Kate, he said, we need to speak. Immediately. Behind him, the company lawyer, Robert, held a stack of papers and looked like someone had drained all the blood from his face. And next to him, arms crossed and eyes burning, stood Ethan. He looked different today. There was no smirk, no arrogance, only panic disguised poorly as rage. I walked inside calmly and took a seat. No one else sat. Mr. Beaumont exhaled slowly. Tell me you didn't send project documentation to clients and board members. It wasn't to everyone, I replied. Only to those directly impacted by decisions made without proper approval. Robert shut his eyes briefly like he was silently begging a higher power for patience. Ethan slammed his palm against the table. You went behind management. You tried to sabotage me. I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked. His anger wasn't leadership. It was fear. I shared factual project records. I said evenly. If those documents jeopardize your credibility, that isn't sabotage. It's transparency. Silence. A thick, trembling silence. Robert cleared his throat. Kate, the board is alarmed. 2 major clients have already requested meetings. 1 forwarded your documentation and asked whether they should begin transitioning their contract. I didn't flinch. I already knew. One of them called me last night. Mr. Beaumont scrubbed a hand across his forehead. Why would you do this? Why not come to me directly? I met his eyes, not with anger, but with exhaustion. I did, many times. I let the words settle. Slow, heavy, true. You dismissed every concern as resistance to change. You let Ethan push policies, contracts, and timelines without oversight. My job was to protect the company from preventable mistakes. And instead, I was punished for doing exactly that. His shoulders slumped just slightly. For the first time, he looked less like a CEO, more like a man realizing something he built was cracking. Ethan scoffed. Dad, she's manipulating this. No. Mr. Beaumont's voice cut clean through the room. Enough. Ethan froze. Everyone froze. Mr. Beaumont looked at me again, expression harder now, but not cruel, calculating. What do you want, Kate? He asked quietly. It wasn't a question of negotiation. It was a question of admission. That he had lost control. That something irreversible had shifted. I took a breath. Nothing. I've already resigned. His jaw tightened. You are critical to ongoing operations. No, I said softly. I was critical. Past tense. Another silence. Longer. More tense. Robert finally spoke. Kate, legally speaking, since you resigned before any disciplinary action concluded, your contracts, including your severance clause and vested stock, remain enforceable. Ethan's head snapped toward him. What stock? My eyes flicked to him. He truly had no idea. Of how business works. Of how contracts work. Of how much I had built while he played executive. Robert continued carefully. Kate holds shares tied to departmental growth metrics. Based on current valuation, those holdings are substantial. How substantial? Ethan demanded. Robert didn't answer. I did. Enough that ignoring my warnings wasn't just insulting, it was financially irresponsible. Mr. Beaumont inhaled sharply. A man used to control. A man suddenly aware he didn't have it. He swallowed. Kate, please, come back to my office. Let's renegotiate. I stood, not abruptly, not dramatically, just done. There was nothing left to renegotiate. I walked toward the door. Before leaving, I paused and spoke. Not to him, not to Ethan, but to the room. To build something lasting, leadership has to be earned, not inherited. Then I walked out. No one followed. No one spoke. No one breathed. I expected silence after leaving the conference room. Instead, the moment I stepped into the hallway, someone moved toward me. It was Maya, one of the analysts from my team. Her eyes were glossy, her voice shaky. "Is it true?" she whispered. "You're really leaving?" I nodded. She swallowed hard, looked away, and then surprised me by pulling me into a hug. Quick, tight, like someone clinging to the last moment before things changed forever. "You were the only manager who ever listened," she murmured. "I'm sorry it ended like this." I rested a hand on her shoulder. "It didn't end," I said quietly. "It just changed direction." She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't convinced. When she returned to her desk, others stood and watched me walk away. Some with respect, some with regret. Others with fear in their eyes because they knew what my departure meant. There was no safety net now. Not for them. Not for the company. Not for the truth. By the time I reached the lobby, word had spread beyond whispers. The air felt electric, like the building itself was aware that something irreversible had happened. The elevator chimed behind me and I heard hurried footsteps. "Kate, wait." It wasn't a voice filled with anger or authority. It was tired. And strangely, human. I turned. Mr. Beaumont approached. No entourage, no lawyer, no Ethan shadowing him. Just a man, older than yesterday, shoulders heavier, eyes uncertain. "Walk with me," he said. A request this time, not a command. We stepped outside. The late morning air carried the smell of rain, cold but cleansing. Traffic hummed, indifferent to the power shift happening on the sidewalk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he exhaled. "When I hired you," he began slowly, "I wasn't looking for someone agreeable. I wanted someone capable of stabilizing growth, someone smart. And yet," I said gently, "when I followed the policies you approved, I was punished for it." His jaw flexed, the reality settling deeper. "I trusted Ethan to grow into the role," he said. "I thought he would learn from people like you." "But he didn't want to learn," I replied. "He wanted authority, not responsibility." That landed, hard. He didn't argue, didn't defend his son, just nodded. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "I read your resignation twice last night," he admitted. "I kept waiting for anger between the lines. Accusations, bitterness." "There was none," I said. "Because I don't need revenge. I need distance." His expression twisted, regret sharpening every crease in his face. "Kate, I didn't realize how much you were carrying." "I know," I replied. "That's why I left." Something broke in his expression then. Not pride, not embarrassment. Something deeper. Recognition. For the first time, he wasn't looking at an employee. He was looking at the fallout of his choices. "I'm not here to ask you to return again," he said finally. "But I do want to understand something." I met his gaze. "What?" "What should I have done differently?" It wasn't a trap. It wasn't manipulation. It was genuinely asked. So I answered honestly. "You should have held Ethan to the same standards as everyone else. You should have listened when your team warned you something was wrong. And you should have recognized that loyalty doesn't mean silence." He closed his eyes for a moment, like absorbing truth felt physically painful. When he spoke again, his voice was low. I failed you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was simply true. I nodded once. Maybe. But you don't have to repeat the failure. He looked up, surprised. Fix what can still be fixed, I continued. Not for me. Not for Ethan. For the people still inside that building doing their best with no protection. We stood in silence after that, two people acknowledging a line that could never be uncrossed. Eventually, he extended his hand. Thank you, Kate. Not for leaving, but for finally forcing him to look at what he avoided. I shook his hand. Then I walked away. Not fast, not triumphant. Just forward. Halfway home, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hello? A woman's voice responded, calm and professional. Hello, Kate. My name is Olivia Martinez. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Evercrest Dynamics. We received your documentation this morning, not through the company, but through a mutual contact. I straightened, pulse steady. Not anxious, just alert. We'd like to speak with you, she continued, about a position, or possibly a partnership. A beat of silence. Then, are you available this afternoon? For the first time since the suspension, I smiled. Yes, I said. I think I am. Because sometimes leaving isn't the end. It's the doorway someone else has been waiting to open. I spent the drive home rehearsing possibilities, not because I needed the perfect response for Olivia, but because everything felt surreal. Just 24 hours earlier, I'd been suspended, humiliated, dismissed as difficult. Now a major company wanted a conversation. When I arrived home, I didn't sit down. I paced, slow steps across my living room, letting the reality settle instead of rushing to react. At 2 p.m., I joined the call. The screen lit up with Olivia's face first. Sharp eyes, calm posture, the kind of presence that didn't need to demand respect. Seconds later, two more faces joined. A CFO named Marcus and their CEO, a woman named Eleanor Clark. No boardroom theatrics, no forced smiles. Just three people who looked like they understood competence. Eleanor spoke first. Kate, we'll be direct. We've seen the results of your work. We've reviewed your documentation, your compliance structure, and your implementation framework. It's rare we see someone combine technical expertise with leadership clarity. I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard. Ethan once told me I was too assertive to be likable. These people were calling that a strength. Marcus leaned closer to his camera. We've been watching Beaumont Industries for months, he said. Their instability is becoming public. Your departure may accelerate that. His tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. Olivia continued. We're expanding and need someone who understands systems, accountability, and growth at scale. We're offering a role that aligns with how you operate. Chief Strategy Officer. I let the title sit in the space between us. Not a supervisor. Not a department lead. Executive. A position Ethan didn't even know how to spell. Eleanor spoke again, softer this time. You were punished for protecting a company that didn't protect you. We'd rather hire someone who understands the weight of responsibility than someone who wants authority for show. I drew a slow breath. Not because I was unsure, but because I finally felt seen. What would the timeline be? I asked. Eleanor smiled. We were hoping you'd ask. We'd like you to start in 3 weeks, if you're interested. My answer was immediate. I am. Her smile widened, not triumphant, just satisfied. We'll send a draft contract this evening. After the call ended, I sat in silence. Not numb, not overwhelmed, just steady. For the first time in years, my future wasn't tied to someone else's blindness. It was mine. That evening, as promised, the contract arrived. It wasn't a negotiation disguised as an offer. It was respectful, fair, and generous. I forwarded it to a lawyer I trusted, not the one Beaumont used, and closed my laptop. Just as I reached for a cup of tea, my phone lit up again. This time it was James. I hesitated before answering, but I did. His voice was low and strained. "Kate, do you have a minute?" "Yes." There was a pause. One long exhale. "It's chaos here," he said quietly. "Two board members resigned this afternoon. A client froze payments. HR is scrambling, and Ethan—" He stopped, as if searching for a polite version. I supplied one. "Is panicking?" A humorless breath escaped him. "That's the gentle version." I leaned against the counter. "How are you holding up?" The silence spoke louder than his answer. "I'm doing my job," he said finally. "But it's hard watching everything fall apart when it didn't have to." There it was, the truth underneath all of this. It never had to end this way. But ego destroys what humility could save. "You'll be okay," I told him. "You know the work. People trust you. Only because you showed them how to." His words lingered, unexpected, sincere. "James," I said softly, "you don't need me to make decisions. You've always been capable." He didn't argue, didn't deflect. He just whispered, "Thank you." Before hanging up, he added something else, quiet but heavy. "They're asking if you'll come back as a consultant. I told them not to call you unless they plan to listen this time." I smiled, not out of spite, but closure. "Tell them no." Already did. That small detail mattered more than he knew. Someone finally drew a boundary. Not because I demanded it, but because they understood why it mattered. Later that night, my lawyer called. "I reviewed the contract," she said. "This is an opportunity most people wait a decade for. They respect you. Accept it." "I will." "And one more thing," she added, her voice shifting warmer. "You didn't just walk away from a company. You walked away from a pattern. That takes courage." After the call ended, I stood by the window, watching city lights flicker against the glass. I'd always been afraid that leaving meant losing everything I'd worked for. I never expected leaving to be the thing that opened every door I'd been shut out of. And somewhere deep inside, a certainty settled. This was not the climax. This was the turning point. The part of the story where the person who was pushed aside finally takes their rightful place, not out of revenge, but out of undeniable worth. And the people who underestimated me? They hadn't seen the last consequence yet. Not even close. 3 months later, my life barely resembled the one I'd walked away from. My days were full. Strategy meetings, development planning, leadership discussions, not chaos, not politics. People asked questions because they wanted clarity, not ammunition. Respect wasn't demanded. It was embedded in the culture. At Evercrest, I wasn't tolerated. I was valued. Some mornings I still woke up expecting a crisis notification, a last-minute scramble, or an angry voicemail from someone who mistook entitlement for authority. But instead, I woke to quiet, to stability, to purpose. The kind that didn't require proving my worth every single day just to survive. It was a Friday afternoon when the past resurfaced. I was finishing a final review of a quarterly report when my assistant knocked gently. "Kate, there's someone asking to see you. He says it's urgent." I looked up, expecting a vendor or partner, but when I stepped into the lobby, I froze. Mr. Beaumont. His suit looked worn, his posture tired. He held a folder in one hand and in the other, something I never expected to see. Humility. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," he said. I didn't agree. I clarified gently. "I agreed to hear why you're here." He nodded, accepting the correction. We walked to a small meeting room. Neutral space, no power dynamic. When the door closed, he didn't start with excuses. He didn't start with business. He started with the truth. The company is failing. There was no bitterness in his tone, just quiet resignation. We lost 3 major accounts. Investors are nervous. The board is restructuring. Ethan, he paused, struggling for the right words. Ethan has stepped down. He's getting help. I let the information sit in the space between us, not to gloat, but to understand. And where does that leave you? I asked. He exhaled. With regret, he said, and hope something can still be salvaged. He took a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside were revised governance documents, leadership changes, accountability measures. It was everything I once asked for. Policies that would have prevented everything that happened. Policies now written only after the damage was undeniable. You're rebuilding, I said. Yes, he replied. But we need help. Direction, structure. Then, slowly, carefully, we need you. The words weren't flattering. They were heavy, costly, earned. I studied him. Not the CEO I once feared, but a man who had finally faced consequences instead of hiding behind authority. What exactly are you asking? I asked finally. His voice softened, almost breaking. A chance. Not to erase the past, but to do better moving forward. A long moment passed. I thought about the years I spent shrinking myself to avoid conflict. The nights I stayed late fixing mistakes to protect a company that refused to protect me. The version of myself who believed loyalty required self-abandonment. And then I thought about now. A team who trusted me. A workplace that respected me. A future that wasn't built on apology. I folded my hands. I'm willing to help, I said slowly, but not the way you once expected. He lifted his eyes. You won't return. No. The finality wasn't cruel. It was honest. I will not step back into a role where I had to justify my worth. But I'll agree to consult. Temporarily, with defined boundaries, written authority, and full independence. If you want guidance, I'll give it. But I won't be the person carrying the entire company on my back again. He swallowed. Relief and resignation mixed together. That's more than fair. He stood, then paused. There's one more thing, he said quietly. I never apologized. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because apologies aren't owed in rush. He continued anyway. I should have protected you. I should have listened. And I should have recognized your value before it cost everyone this much. His voice tightened. I'm sorry, Kate. For the first time since the day I walked out, the tension inside me loosened. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just release. Thank you, I said. Sometimes closure isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's a soft truth placed gently where a wound used to be. He left the building with a different posture than he arrived. Not defeated, but aware. I watched him go, then returned to my office. My office earned, not inherited. As I sat at my desk, the thought settled fully. Leaving wasn't losing. Leaving was choosing. Choosing myself. Choosing dignity. Choosing a life where my worth wasn't conditional. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't ruining someone. It's becoming someone they can never diminish again. And I did. Not to prove anything, but because I finally learned something it took years to understand. You do not owe an apology for refusing to be underestimated. Not then. Not now. Not ever.